Good morning. My name is Constable Danny McKinnon, Public Information Officer with the Winnipeg Police Service. I would just like to start by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 41st Nation in Treaty 3 territory. Thank you for coming, everybody. We're gathered here today for a press conference regarding an organized crime project that began in April of 2024. It's titled Project Lowkey, and we have a number of people presenting and available to answer questions. Today, this project will be presented by Inspector Josh Ewatski of the Organized Crime Division. As well, we have RCMP Superintendent Jeff Osmondson to answer questions after the presentation, and Manitoba First Nations Police Service member Inspector Derek Beach. Also present, Honorable Justice Minister Matt Wiebe will be sitting in. Thank you very much.
Morning. We're here today to highlight some of the excellent police work that has recently been done by the Winnipeg Police Organized Crime Unit, working in collaboration with a number of our law enforcement partners in Manitoba and beyond. As Constable McKinnon mentioned, we're fortunate to have RCMP Superintendent Jeff Osmondson and Manitoba First Nations Police Inspector Derek Beach with us today. To put some context to this investigation, I can tell you that when it comes to our enforcement, Winnipeg Police Service focuses a great deal on the resources and illicit drug trade in the city. We do this at the street level with our guns and gangs unit, as well as our community support units, as well as at mid-level, we focus on mid-level drug dealing through our drug enforcement unit. The work of our organized crime unit, which we are focusing on here today, typically targets the more sophisticated drug networks and criminal organizations that move illicit drugs throughout the province and across the country. Project Lowkey, which we are presenting here today, is an excellent example of the work being done by our Organized Crime Unit, and it also highlights the importance, the effectiveness of working in collaboration with our law enforcement partners, both within Manitoba and across the country. Along with Manitoba D Division RCMP and First Nations Police, I'd like to recognize a number of police agencies that helped us in this investigation. They are the Ontario Provincial Police, the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary, Saskatoon Police Service, Toronto Police Service, the Vancouver Police Department, and Calgary Organized Crime Response Unit. As you'll hear in a moment, this investigation highlights the capabilities of organized crime groups to extend their reach beyond provincial borders to target communities across the country, including some of our most vulnerable communities in the northern province and of all the northern provinces. I can assure you that everyone up here today understands that organized crime groups do not respect jurisdictional boundaries, and as such, for law enforcement to be effective, there has to be constant communication, information sharing, and the willingness and readiness to aggressively pursue investigations such as this in our province. I'm pleased to say that this climate does in fact exist in Manitoba, and we're looking forward to building on the success of this project in the future. Project Lowkey began in May of 2024, and it targeted individuals from Toronto who were coming to Winnipeg with the specific intent of selling drugs in Manitoba. Investigators soon learned that other individuals linked to a Toronto-based organized crime group were specifically targeting northern and Indigenous communities in Manitoba, and as well as several provinces throughout the country. These individuals were profiting off of these communities by selling cocaine, methamphetamine, hydromorphone, and MDMA. The organized crime unit's focus quickly expanded, resulting in an interprovincial drug investigation, and we engaged our partners in law enforcement agencies throughout the country. Our cooperative 9-month-long investigation led to the execution of numerous search warrants throughout Canada, where multiple kilograms of cocaine, methamphetamine, and other drugs were seized, along with firearms and a large amount of currency. The organized crime group used sophisticated methods to transport their drugs to the communities through Canada, including airplanes, trains, off-road vehicles, boats, mail service, and trap vehicles, which are cars and trucks, that have sophisticated, professionally built hidden compartments built in them into the vehicle and are usually operated with a hydraulic device. The individuals transporting these drugs and firearms use fraudulent identification, such as driver's licenses from multiple provinces, social insurance numbers to travel on commercial airlines and railways. They also use fraudulent identification to open bank accounts throughout Canada so as to be able to access the money to fund their operations. When arriving in larger cities, they would use hotel rooms and Airbnbs to establish their drug operation and store their product and firearms. They would then move into northern communities and First Nation communities by collaborating with and eventually taking over already established drug networks. On January 31st of this year, Project Lowkey ended with the execution of arrest and search warrants in Winnipeg, Thompson, and Sandy Bay First Nation in Manitoba, Toronto, Scarborough, and Brampton in Ontario, and Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. This was done with the assistance of the Winnipeg Police, RCMP, Ontario Provincial Police, and Toronto Police tactical teams. As a result of the investigation, the following seizures and arrests were made: 10.4 kilograms of cocaine, 16.73 ounces of crack cocaine, 8.73 kilograms of methamphetamine, 25,000 hydromorphone pills, 18 MDMA pills, 38.56 ounces of cutting agent, 10.99 grams of hash, approximately $280,000 in Canadian currency, over 900 Percocet pills, as well as score sheets and documentation and drug packaging and trafficking material. We also seized 7 handguns, all loaded, which were all traced back to the United States. Along with the handguns was a black drum magazine loaded with 45 rounds of ammunition, 4 high-capacity 9mm magazines, over 400 rounds of various ammunition, a 2020 Dodge Durango, a 2016 Honda Accord, and a 2013 Acura RDX. All of these vehicles had the previously mentioned traps built into them. 9 individuals were arrested. 2 individuals were from Winnipeg and Sandy Bay First Nation in Manitoba. 6 individuals were from the Greater Toronto Area, and 1 was an American citizen from North Carolina. They were all arrested and charged with a wide array of drug trafficking, firearm, and conspiracy-related charges. I'd like to note, too, that one of the individuals, the one that was arrested actually in Saskatchewan, was found to be wanted on a first-degree warrant, Canada-wide first-degree warrant for first-degree murder and attempt murder ×2 out of Toronto, and was also listed on the Canada's Most Wanted. 2 other individuals arrested had previous convictions for murder. 5 individuals are still being sought by police for the same charges. They are Aaron Wolf Plume, 22 years, of Alberta; Mohammed Abdirahman, 23, of Ontario; Ramin Khan Mokakala, 22, of Ontario; Marquez Lerma Jordan, 20, of Ontario; and Nathan Sylvester, 22 years, of Ontario. I'll take any questions you may have.
You mentioned that these were sophisticated means of smuggling the drugs. What exactly does that mean? I know you touched on it with the vehicles, having traps, but as far as like using commercial airlines and transport services, what makes those sophisticated?
Well, the sophistication was in, like I said, the traps that were built in the vehicle, as well as that they were able to acquire numerous forms of fraudulent documentation in order to travel on airplanes and trains commercially with large amounts of drugs on them. and some of them one was wanted for murder and attempt murder. And being on a most wanted list and still being able to travel through the country freely is pretty sophisticated. As well as the documentation they had to open up the bank accounts so that they could easily access money from anywhere in the country.
And you mentioned about the First Nations Police Service also assisting you with investigation. If you could tell us a little more that, all these drugs reaching First Nations, could elaborate a bit more on that, like how common is it when it goes to all these First Nations?
Well, from our experience in Winnipeg, it's very common. However, I'll let Inspector Beach answer that a little bit further.
Hello, it's Derek Beach with the Manitoba First Nations Police Service. In regards to your question, unfortunately, it is too common in our First Nations communities for the drugs to come in. With a project of this size, we know, for the most part, drugs are coming into these First Nation communities from the city of Winnipeg, our larger urban centers. So to get back to the point that it is fairly common for the drugs to come into our First Nation communities. In this project, they were coming into Sandy Bay. We believe that Sandy Bay was a hub where the drugs were broken down and then subsequently traveling up north to other First Nation communities and other smaller northern communities in Manitoba.
Inspector, it's been well documented that drug trafficking in First Nations communities has been a struggle. How's the First Nations Police Service addressing that, and what more do you need to help address that?
We are addressing it in many ways. One of the ways we are addressing it is in getting more resources for our police service. We are currently going through recruit classes right now that is expanding our complement. We are gathering more intelligence-based information, and we are sharing it with our partners in Winnipeg and the RCMP. Obviously, we are able to, when we share that information, we're able to connect the dots and realize that this was a large organized crime unit using one of the First Nations communities as a hub. We are also always educating our members, trying to make them become more proactive in recognizing individuals that do not belong in the community, that are there to do drug activity or gang activity. So
did any of the First Nations people recognize this individuals during the investigation? Did they give you that tip that there is something happening here?
Well, part of this investigation was that our officers who do work in the Sandy Bay and do work up in OCN obviously were able to recognize individuals or gather intelligence from the public and obviously from their own observations and submit those intelligence reports.
Inspector, I'm curious about how all of these drugs going on commercial airlines and through those means of transportation, how do they go undetected? Obviously, in vehicles, there was a sophisticated things, but what about the other means?
They have different methods of concealing them in luggage, typically, through packaging and stuff like that. That's primarily what we're seeing. It's going through luggage. And whatever they're using is either able to fool scanners or just doesn't get picked up.
Is there any liability on the airlines that are using that aren't catching this?
I don't think that's really what I can speak to. From our perspective, in terms of laying charges, no.
So, are they going to, Project lowkey started last year, and is it going to continue, are you going to continue targeting organized crime groups, or has project stopped?
Well, with the organized crime unit, that is always the main focus is targeting sophisticated, high-level organized crime groups in Manitoba, just in Winnipeg, throughout the province, and throughout Canada. And typically what we're seeing with our high-level investigations is that every investigation has a national nexus, so they're spread across the country. And what we're seeing is, and I can speak for Winnipeg, is that organized crime members from Ontario and Toronto are coming here because they know that they can come into these communities who are vulnerable in many ways and prey off their vulnerabilities. And their sole purpose there is to make money off these people.
How did the Winnipeg Police become aware of this network?
Through the initial investigation and some information that we had.
Sorry, to be clear on the investigation, was this, because you go across jurisdictions, was the impetus of the national investigation here, or was Winnipeg and the Manitoba RCMP brought in from other jurisdictions for the investigation?
No, it began in Winnipeg.
I have a question for the Justice Minister. Well, I mean, Minister, this investigation has all the makings of a Hollywood film. I mean, what's your concern here, and what's the government doing to crack down on these types of networks?
Well, first of all, I just want to take an opportunity to thank our law enforcement within the province here. It's important to note, of course, that we have an important investigation that was initiated by the WPS, but supported ultimately by RCMP and by the Manitoba First Nations Police Service. I think this speaks to the ways that we can collaborate across the province when it comes to our law enforcement agencies. And ultimately, that's the role that the province can continue to play in this, is to make sure that we're supporting that work, that we're providing intelligence within our department, and then collaborating again across the country with other law enforcement as well. So there's a lot of work that can be done there. With regards to this particular bus, this is, this is a substantial bust that we're seeing here. And I think it speaks to the fact that organized crime is active in the province of Manitoba for years. We didn't have the resources to properly address these kind of concerns. And the support for law enforcement was frozen for a number of years under the previous government. And so from my perspective, our additional investments are making a difference because they're supporting our law enforcement agencies that are doing this work. Again, the fact is that this is out in our communities, and in any way we can shut that down, we can stop that, when we can support First Nations communities, when we can support communities outside of the city of Winnipeg, and of course for the folks who live in the city of Winnipeg, this is another blow against organized crime. And that's been a focus for our government, our Unexplained Wealth Act, further targeting of organized crime specifically. This has been a priority of our government, will continue to be.
And would there be any extra security measures, especially since all these drugs were transported across provinces? So would there become extra security measures, extra checks when when they're being transported or anything like that?
Well, it's an important note. Folks will know that because of our continued work at the international border, and of course our commitments, within the province, but now nationally, to look at drug trafficking specifically as an area that the federal government has shown that they're interested in now focusing on. Their fentanyl, specifically is what they've talked about. But from our perspective in Manitoba, that means going after organized crime. And what I can say is that while we're ensuring that we're beefing up our security at the border. If you talk to these gentlemen, if you talk to any of our intelligence folks, they will say that ultimately it's across the country. It's interprovincial drug trafficking or movement of drugs across the country where we're seeing a lot of activity. So you can be assured that the additional resources that we expect to see from the federal government with regards to maybe fentanyl specifically, but drug trafficking more broadly, we expect that some of those resources will ultimately be a net benefit for us to stop this interprovincial drug trade.
It was touched upon about the particular communities that were targeted, you know, sort of those northern kind of remote communities. I don't know if you can speak to this, but is there anything already planned for the provincial government to sort of maybe help out the,
Yeah.
What's the next step in making sure that these vulnerable groups and communities are
Yeah.
protected?
Well, two elements to that question. First is support for our Manitoba First Nations Police Service. Our government has made it a focus to continue to build on the resources that they have, and that extends both to the police service itself, but also to First Nations safety officers who are used in many communities to supplement the work of either Manitoba First Nations Police or RCMP. So there's certainly a renewed focus on additional resources and funding. We know additional communities are coming on stream. We'll have more to say about that soon. The other piece, and I mentioned it earlier, is that coordinating role that the province of Manitoba can play. Again, we've got great officers out in communities across this province, and what we're asking now is how can we work together more efficiently, and how can we share information? It's one of the asks from the federal government, specifically when it comes to the issue around bail. But they've talked a lot about information gathering and sharing and sort of feeding this back in to the overall intelligence network. We've been playing that part here in Manitoba. We've stepped up and we've continued to fund that work, but that's going to continue to be a focus. How do we coordinate these police efforts across the province?
Any last questions? Thank you very much.